a notorious criminal.
Jesse James was never anything but an outlaw.
An outlaw with a cult-like following.
Today we'd call him a terrorist.
That's a northern term.
Caught on a haunting image.
This is a controversial photo.
Next to his killer,
It's either Jesse James and Bob Ford or it isn't.
it's her strange inheritance, and it could bring in a bounty.
People questioned it. They wanted to see proof.
We've heard everything from $50,000 to $500,000.
15,000 here now, 20, gonna get my 20.
I'm Jamie Colby, just northeast of Bellingham, Washington, near the Canadian border. Beautiful, isn't it? The woman I'm about to meet is the heir of a controversial relic that, according to family lore, connects her and her ancestors to Jesse James and his notorious gang from the 1860s and 70s.
My name is Sandy Mills, and I inherited a very old picture from my grandmother, Isabel. She said it was the infamous outlaw Jesse James. I believed it, but it didn't seem like anybody else really did.
Sandy.
Hi.
I'm Jamie. So nice to meet you, and I can't wait to hear your story.
Sandy explains that her roots go back to Missouri, where her grandmother, Isabel, shared with her the family legend that their forebears occasionally aided Jesse James.
The outlaw Jesse James.
Yes, ma'am. She would tell me the stories as I was growing up, how they would give them horses and food and shelter, just protect them.
To prove it, Grandma Isabel shows Sandy this picture, known as a tintype. It's an early form of photography, using a chemical emulsion to transfer a direct, positive image to a small metal plate. So each tin is unique, a camera original.
When did you first learn about it?
I was about 5 years old, and she would take out the tin, and she would show it to me.
Who's in the picture exactly?
And it's Jesse James and Bob Ford. He was the one that took his life.
Seems very unusual for the two of them to be in a picture together.
It is, and it's the only one. So my family had it.
Is Sandy's strange inheritance the real thing? If so, this image might be worth a bundle. One of the most valuable photos ever is this tintype of Western outlaw Billy the Kid. It sells for $2.3 million to billionaire Bill Cope in 2011. Jesse James is no less a legend. Like our heir Sandy, he hails from rural western Missouri.
Jesse James was born in September 1847.
Missouri historian Christopher Gordon.
His father was a Baptist preacher, a hemp farmer, and he was a slaveholder.
Jesse and his older brother Frank grow up as tensions are escalating across the U.S. over slavery. With neighboring Kansas, a territory deciding whether to be free or slave, exploding in violence.
The rhetoric is heating up how law-abiding Missourians should be able to maintain the lifestyle that they want to lead.
When Civil War breaks out in 1861, Missouri remains in the Union, but is bitterly divided. Frank James joins a band of Confederate guerrilla fighters. At 14, Jesse is too young to join, but he's spoiling for a fight.
Did the family pick sides in the war?
Oh, absolutely.
Frida Cruz Hardison is an author whose latest book uses genealogical research to track thousands of local stories going back to Frank and Jesse James.
They were never anything but Southerners.
Legend has it that when Jesse's 16 years old, the James farm is attacked by Union soldiers looking for his rebel brother, Frank.
From that point on, Jesse James seems bent on revenge. He takes up with these guerrilla fighters and basically terrorize the western part of the state.
When the South surrenders in 1865 and slavery is outlawed, the James boys return home.
Their farm had been decimated. They couldn't get a job.
Seething with resentment, the brothers figure they can still attack the Yankees by stealing from them. James and his gang of ex-Confederates plot a bold bank robbery in broad daylight, the first of its kind on American soil. On February 13, 1866, they enter Clay County Savings.
Everyone on the ground, now! Get down!
They seize 60,000 bucks. That would be 800 grand today. As they're fleeing, one of the gang guns down a witness in cold blood. There are more bank and train robberies, just as violent.
Today we'd call him a terrorist.
That's a northern term.
They killed a lot of people.
Today he would have been a good soldier if he was on the right side, a terrorist if he wasn't.
So we should feel sorry for him?
No, he was good at what he did. It was still a way of life for them, a holdover from the Civil War.
Journalists romanticize the outlaws who move from one hideout to another with help from the locals.
It was at the home of Southerners they stayed, and they would leave money for dinner or horses or whatever. Hundreds of people had little tidbit stories.
Sympathetic Southerners, like Sandy Mills' family.
He cared about people. He helped out families as much as possible. It was just different back then.
It wasn't the type of Robin Hood, I give away the money, I rob from the rich and give to the poor, but I rob from the Union and I sustain the Southerner.
That was kind of a thin veneer over his real intention. Jesse James enjoyed the thrill of being a bandit.
A bandit whose gang is responsible for more than 20 bank and train robberies and the murders of at least 17 people who stand in their way.
Missouri became known as the outlaw state. It was really a public relations disaster.
By 1881, the governor of Missouri has seen enough.
He approaches the heads of the railroad. They come together and offer a reward. It's $10,000.
By now, 34-year-old Jesse James is getting a little old for a life of crime. He takes on a false identity and moves his family to St. Joseph, Missouri, to start a new life.
Many of his friends were dead.
But Jesse wants another heist before he retires. He just needs a few new renegades. Enter 22-year-old Bob Ford, who's thrilled to join forces with a legendary outlaw. But the newly formed kinship is about to turn sour.
If Bob Ford couldn't be Jesse James, the next best thing would be to kill him.
Which could make this tiny tin type a valuable artifact of one of the most notorious murders in history.
But first, our strange inheritance quiz question. Which legendary gunslinger later worked in Hollywood? Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, or Butch Cassidy? The answer after the break. So, which legendary gunslinger later worked in Hollywood? It's Wyatt Earp. He became a technical advisor on silent cowboy films and befriended a young John Wayne.
As Sandy Mills grows up, her grandmother, Isabel, promises that when she dies, she'll leave Sandy her tintype photo. Grandma tells her it's a one-of-a-kind image of legendary outlaw Jesse James and his killer, Bob Ford, whom she calls the Coward. The picture, she adds, is hugely valuable.
She wanted me to have a good life, so she said, "This is Jesse James and the Coward, and this is now yours. Go do something with it."
So, when Isabel passes away in 2006 at age 85, the tintype becomes Sandy's strange inheritance. But while there are tales of the family harboring the James gang, no one knows why they came to possess the picture. Only that it dates back to Sandy's great-great-great-grandmother, Pauline Roundtree.
It's just passed on through all the ladies, and then my grandma gave it to me.
Sandy's now a single mom, living in Washington State with a young son to raise.
I wanted to sell it because I could make a nice start for me and my son, you know, have a home and everything.
So it could be a life changer. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
And here's why. On April 3rd, 1882, Jesse James is unaware that his new recruit, Bob Ford, has turned him in, hoping to collect a hefty $10,000 reward. He's with the Ford brothers here, at his home in St. Joseph, Missouri, planning another bank robbery.
This is the actual room.
Right here?
Right here. Jesse had noticed that the cross stitch was crooked.
God bless our home.
So he stood on the chair, and that was when Bob Ford took the opportunity to shoot him in the back of the head. You see this spot over here? Imagine Jesse falling backwards out of the chair onto the floor.
I can see there's an indentation.
It was originally a bloody spot on the floor, and souvenir hunters picked the bloody splinters away to leave an indentation in the floor.
Unbelievable.
Hundreds of people scurried to the house to see the body.
They took his chairs, they took clapboards off the side of the house. Once they knew it was Jesse James, they were immediately ripping apart the house.
Bob Ford, who hoped to gain fame and a $10,000 fortune, receives a fraction of the bounty, then flees Missouri in fear for his life.
He wanted to be Jesse. He wanted his life, and so he eventually took his life. He didn't get too much out of it. A lot of disrespect.
Now Sandy hopes a collector will pay big bucks for the historic image of James and his killer. She makes dozens of calls, but there's a glaring problem.
People wanted to see proof. They wanted to see authentication. They wanted to see forensics.
There are plenty of family stories that so-and-so got handed this down, but there's no paperwork or genealogy.
Rob Burley, owner of Burley Auction Gallery in New Braunfels, Texas.
Old West relics, there's so few real ones out there, so the ones that you can document, there's a built-in value. There's more people collecting them every year.
Sandy keeps looking for anyone who can help her attract the interest of those collectors. It's early 2015 when she comes across a news story about Lois Gibson, who authenticated yet another photo of Billy the Kid.
She did Billy the Kid, and so that was another, oh, okay, she's done one already.
Turns out Lois is a renowned forensic artist working for the Houston Police Department. She holds the Guinness World Record for most criminals accurately ID'd. So Sandy emails a scan of her Jesse James Bob Ford tintype to Lois.
Lois, you hear from Sandy and you think what?
I was just going to look at it and tell her, no, it's not Jesse James, and get rid of her.
Then she takes a closer look at the picture. She starts by comparing the tintype to this undisputed wedding photo of James.
The area below the nose and the top of the lip is the philtrum. Notice he dents in a certain way.
Strong dent.
Strong dent. And then the top of the lip shape, his is like roof peaks, little pointy roof peaks. That's the same.
Lois agrees to perform a full forensic analysis. She compares the tintype to the official Jesse James death photo.
And then I got the final picture, the picture of him in his coffin. This was very important. In a computer program, you make them the same size. You make one transparent and lay it atop the other one.
The resemblance between Sandy's tintype and the deceased Jesse James is remarkable. For Lois, it's the clincher.
I realized, oh my God, it is Jesse James.
If you went to court and had to testify about it?
I'll be willing to testify in a court of law. It's either Jesse James or it isn't, and it just darn well is.
Lois also says the other guy darn well is Bob Ford, based on other known photos of him. Auctioneer Rob Burley knows a photo of Jesse James and his killer would be an exceptionally compelling collectible.
You don't see Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Kennedy together. That's how creepy that would be.
But dealers like Rob will want more proof. If that is James and Ford, somebody should be able to trace the history of the tintype back to its origin and convincingly explain why Sandy's ancestor ended up with it. Help may be on the way.
I saw it on the news. I was very intrigued immediately.
Here's another quiz question for you. Which movie features Clint Eastwood as a Missouri farmer who joins a band of Confederate raiders? Unforgiven, High Plains Drifter, or The Outlaw Josie Wales? The answer when we return. So, in which movie does Clint Eastwood play a Missouri farmer who joins a band of Confederate raiders? It's The Outlaw Josie Wales. Eastwood's character is loosely based on Jesse James.
Sandy Mills has taken the first step in proving the vintage tintype she inherited is the only known photo of outlaw Jesse James and his killer, Bob Ford, thanks to an authentication by a forensic artist in Texas.
It was amazing. She was absolutely certain.
Sandy sends her findings to auctioneer Rob Burley in New Braunfels, Texas. Rob's impressed, but there are still questions of where the tintype came from and how Sandy's family ended up with it.
The value often is dependent upon how good the provenance is.
Provenance. That's auctioneer talk for evidence that an artifact is exactly what you say it is. Seems Sandy hasn't convinced him yet. But thanks to Lois Gibson's analysis, the tintype is now getting some buzz in the press. That's how Frida Cruz Hardison, that local historian we met earlier, catches wind of the story. What was your first reaction?
I was very intrigued immediately. The thing that popped out to me was the name of Pauline Roundtree, which was Sandy's 3 times great-grandmother.
Frida turns to her genealogy database. It maps the connections of nearly 15,000 people to the Jesse James family. She types in the name, Pauline Roundtree.
I already had her, knew who she was and what the relationship was.
What was it?
She was married to Robert Stevenson, who was a cousin of Annie Ralston, Frank James's wife. Frank was Jesse's brother.
So it makes complete sense that Sandy's ancestor would have a picture of her infamous in-law. Did Sandy know any of this?
She knew none of it. It was her 3 times great-grandmother's first husband, not the line she was from. So she had just totally missed what the relationship was.
She did all the proof going down and wrote about the family tree lines, which was really cool.
Frida even pinpoints the most likely photographer in St. Joseph, Missouri, Rudy Ullman. So how'd you figure out he's the photographer? Doesn't have his name on it, doesn't even have a date.
He's the only photographer of any standing in St. Joe at that time, and he ended up taking the death photo.
Frida believes Bob Ford and Jesse James posed for the tintype at Ullman's studio just weeks before his death, while the Ford brothers were holed up at the outlaw's home in St. Joseph. Auctioneer Rob Burley is now convinced the item's ready to sell. Your dream team. You got Lois, a historian, and you have an auctioneer. That must have been a relief.
Yeah. Yes, it was.
Question is, how much could it fetch?
We've heard everything from $50,000 to $500,000. We really have no idea where it's going to land.
Now 20, I'm at 15,000, you're now 20, 20, get by 20, 20, now 25.
What's your strange inheritance story? We'd love to tell it. Send me an email or go to our website, strangeinheritance.com.
Now, back to Strange Inheritance.
In January 2017, this vintage tintype of American outlaw Jesse James, along with his killer Bob Ford, hits the auction block at Burley Auction Gallery in New Braunfels, Texas.
We really had no clue where it was going to go.
In addition to Sandy's tintype, Rob Burley's auctioning a large collection of Texas Ranger guns and badges. Over 100 people have shown up, along with plenty of phone bidders.
Today you'll have everybody from the buyer that's here looking for a beer stein to the ones that are looking for an antique Colt, from the $100 buyer to the $1 million buyer.
Which one will bid on Sandy's strange inheritance? Or will it be someone in between?
200, now 2 1/4, bid to get by 2 1/4, 2 1/4, now 2 1/2, 2 1/2, now 275, 275.
Just after noon, it's time for the Jesse James picture to test the marketplace.
Lot number 150 is a photograph attributed to Jesse James and Bob Ford. We got a call from Sandy Mills from up in Washington State. She told us about how her family had handed it down through generations from her grandmother. So here you go. We're going to start it cheap enough that everybody can bid, everybody can play. Where do y'all want to start it?
It starts at $5,000. Not so promising.
Here, I got 5, now 10, 5,000 here, now 10, 10, bidding by 10, 5,000, 10, now 15, 15.
At $15K, all but 3 bidders drop out.
Now 20, I'm at 15,000 here, now 20, 20, bidding by 20, 20, now 25, 20 here, now.
Now it's $25K. How long before someone blinks?
Now 30, I'm at 25, 30, now 35, now 40, I'm at 35, now 40. Sell it your way.
Sold for $35,000. Not exactly the payday Rob once thought possible, But that's the auction business. The proof is always in the bidding.
I wish it would have brought $1 million. It didn't, but I'm happy with what it brought.
The buyer, Texas collector Terry Verbert, is really happy. He thinks he got a steal.
I think I got an extremely good deal, rare deal, and I don't think it'll ever be sold that cheap again.
As for the heir in this strange inheritance story, she can live with the result, even if $35K isn't the life changer she had hoped for.
I actually wanted to maybe buy a bed and breakfast and do gardens and just raise my son the best way that I can come up with, and this would be it.
No regrets on selling it?
I have no regrets. It's sold, and we did good, and it's out there now. I want it to be in history books.
Controversy just seems to be the rule for all things related to Jesse James. Fittingly, after the notorious outlaw's death in 1882, there was speculation he had faked his own murder. The rumor circulated until 1995, when scientists dug up the grave and performed a DNA test that proved the body was indeed Jesse James. I'm Jamie Colby. Thanks so much for watching Strange Inheritance. And remember, you can't take it with you.